Today we're going to build an assignments tracker, and the assignments have categories. They're categorized by the course name, so you can choose each course name you want if you only want to see those assignments in the tracker, and then it will only display the assignments from a specific course name, or you could say category, or you can view all of the assignments from all of the categories at once. And then when you add an assignment, you have to pick a course name from the drop box and then type in an assignment. And of course that works, but then you can also go to the view and edit courses, because if you have an assignment to add for a course that you don't yet have, the way to do that would be create the course first, and so then you put in test course name and add that, and then this course will now be available when you go back to the full list and want to add another assignment. You can now pick test course out of the list. And of course this assignment tracker is also available in a mobile view and actually designed for mobile first. However, I'm going to probably show it mostly in the desktop view today as we work with it, but you always want to design for mobile devices as well. Notice that on mobile, if the assignments outgrow the window, it then becomes a scrolling window instead of pushing your add assignment portion off of the page as well. And that's because the page is laid out with the flex box, and then this is set to scroll. And we'll go over that, but the main focus today is the model view controller and PHP logic behind the design of the application. Let's open up the XAMPP control panel. If you don't have XAMPP installed, I will put a link to that below in the description. I also have a tutorial on how to install and set up XAMPP, and that's what we'll be working with for MySQL and of course Apache to run PHP. Let's click the admin button once you have both running, and click the admin button for MySQL, and it will open up My PHP admin. That takes a few seconds, but after My PHP admin gets open, we want to click New on the left side to add a new table, or actually a new database, and then we'll add new tables. So let's add the database name. We'll call this assignment. I'll just stick with all lowercase _ tracker, and I'll click Create. Now we need to create a table, and it's asking what the name is and how many columns we want. Let's call this assignments. And we just need 3 columns, and then we can click Go. Now let's add our 3 columns. The first will be the ID. I'll use all caps. We'll leave that as an integer type. We don't really need to change anything else except the index. It will be primary. And then under A, capital A _ I, which is auto increment, we want to check that. Oh, it popped up a window. Click OK there for primary, and we want to check auto increment. The next field is description, and this will be a different data type. We want to actually type a description in here, and we can leave the rest as is. And the third will be course ID, which we're going to later make a foreign key for the other table that holds the courses. And here we'll leave this as an integer as well. So we're good to go for now on this table. Oh, a valid length. I forgot to put in a length for the description field. Let's put in 120 characters. Okay, with our assignments table created, we can now see it up here. But on the left-hand side, we can see the assignment tracker database is expanded. We see the assignments table. We need to add one more table, so we'll click New above assignments. And now we need to add a table name at the top, and we'll call this courses. And then we'll have course ID, and this will be the primary. It's once again an integer. Let's go ahead and choose primary here. Click Go, and we'll auto increment this field. The next field will be course name. And once again, this will have a description, and we'll give this 50 characters. Click Save, and now we see our 2 tables. Well, here is actually how the courses table is structured with course ID and course name. Our database has 2 tables. Let's go back to the assignments table to complete one more thing. And from here, we'll click on the Structure tab and the Relation view. And now here we will add a course ID foreign key, and this will relate to the assignment tracker database, and we'll be looking at assignments. We'll be looking at courses. There we go. And course ID. It just took a little bit to load. So we're linking the course ID column in the assignments table to the courses table, course ID. So in the assignments table, course ID will be a foreign key. And so I'll just name this course ID as a constraint. We'll save this. And now we can see our foreign key constraints listed right here. Let's look at the table structure for this table. And you can see we have the primary key ID here, but then we also have a little gray key by the course ID, and that means it's a foreign key. And it relates to the course ID that we see in the courses table. Now that we've built our assignment tracker database with an assignments table and a courses table, let's start with Visual Studio Code and start building the MVC project for our assignment tracker. And that's exactly what we'll start with. We'll create a folder and name it Model. And we'll create a second folder and name it View. Not inside the model though, hopefully. There we go. And now let's create a file named index.php, which is the controller. So here we have the model view controller. And I'll start by creating files inside the model folder. And the first file I'm going to create is the database.php file, and it's going to create a connection to the database. So we start with PHP, and then we'll have a DSN, data source name, and that starts with MySQL in this case. And then the host is going to equal localhost here in our dev environment. And then DB name, database name is assignment, there we go, assignment underscore tracker. And then I need to define a username, and I'm just going to assign this to my root user. And then you could have a password on your root, and if you do, you would define it as well. So this is just an example. I'm not going to use a password, but we would define a password if we needed to. Okay, then we'll start a try-catch block to get connected to the database. And here we have our DB connection equals a new PDO, that's PHP data object. We pass in our DSN, and then we pass in our username. And if we had a password, we would pass it in as well. But we don't. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that. And then we can start the catch portion of our try-catch block. We'll catch a PDO exception, and we'll just call that E. You could call it error, the full word if you wanted to. Then we're going to define a variable named error, and that's part of the reason why I didn't want to name it that. And database error, just a string here, and I'm going to add to this string, but I want to start out letting everyone, and by everyone I probably mean me, know that it was a database error. And I'm going to add to the string with a dot equals, and we'll get the error. And now, oh, I don't want a space. And now we'll call the getMessage method to get the error message. And now I'm going to include a file that I haven't created yet. And we'll look in the view, and it'll be our error.php file. So I'll need to create that next. And then we'll exit, because we've encountered an error, and from there we can figure out what to do. So now I'll highlight the view, and I'll create an error.php file. Inside the error.php file, we're going to reference a couple of other files we haven't created yet in the view, but we will. The header.php, won't even need the semicolon since we're going to end that right there. And then we'll also have, and I'll just copy this and paste it and change this to footer. between the header and footer, we'll have the rest of our template for our error page. And I'll just say error, and you know what, let's go ahead and make that, well, no, an H2, because we might have an H1 inside our header that we include. That's fine. So H2, and then a paragraph, and inside our paragraph, we'll go ahead and, you know, we could do this equals instead of PHP echo, and then we'll say error, and then we'll close our paragraph. Put a line break, and we'll start another paragraph, and this is a link, and it's just going to link back to the root here so we can see our list. We'll say back to list so we're not stranded on an error page. And that is the end of the error template. Now let's go ahead and create the header and footer. All right, we're in the view folder. Let's go ahead and click new file again, and we'll create this header.php file. And we'll see if we can use an Emmet abbreviation, and we can. So type 1 exclamation mark, and it starts out the framework of our page. And we just need to change document to assignment tracker. We want these other meta tags that are in the head, and we don't need to change much else. We'll get rid of the closing body in HTML, and let's go ahead and add a main, and I'll give it a class equal to main as well. And the only other thing we need to add to our header is a link to our style sheet that once again doesn't exist yet, but it will. And we'll give it a rel attribute of style sheet, and then we'll say href, and our link needs to point to the view folder and then the CSS folder that we're going to create. And then I'm going to say main.min.css because I'm using Sass, and it will create minified CSS. And we'll save that, and that is the end of our header. Let's create a footer, and as you might guess, we've opened up an HTML tag, a body tag, and a main tag. So we need to close those out in the footer if we don't add anything else. So let's create that new file, footer.php, and we'll close out the main element, close out the body element, close out the HTML element, and we can decide if we want to add anything to it later. But that will at least close out our pages for our templates. Now let's head back to the model folder, and we'll create another new file, and we'll call this assignments_db.php. And here we'll create the functions that will interact with the model for the assignments table. And the first function is the one that we will use the most. It will be the default for loading all of the assignments that we view. So we'll say get_assignments by course. And we'll pass in a course ID, but we also have to be prepared if that course ID for some reason doesn't exist. Now the first thing we need to do is use the global keyword and reference our database connection. So we can pull that into the function. Now let's say if course ID, and that is checking for false or null. So we're saying if there's a value that is not false or null, and then we want to do something, and we're going to create a query, and then we'll also have an else with the query. Now we could create separate functions for this, but in this instance where this is the one function that delivers all of the assignments, whether we want to see the assignments for a specific course ID or we just want to see all of the assignments, I'm good with putting this if statement in this function. Most of the time with the single responsibility principle, I would want to create two separate functions. So here we're going to create a query, and we'll say select, and this is going to join the tables together. So we have an assignment table that I'm going to refer to as A, and we get the ID column and the description column from that table. Then we have a courses table that I'm going to refer to as C, and we want the course name. Not so much interested in the course ID, but we want the course name. And then I'll say from, and here I want to say assignments from the assignments table, and then say that it is A, and then left join, and I'm going to get the code to wrap here for us, and then say courses with a capital C. So now we've defined courses as the C table. On, and now we have to say what field they're going to be joined on. And this is A, and it'll be the course ID equals C with the course ID. And then we can say where, oops, capital A again, course ID equals, and now we're going to put a parameter in our query. And we'll have to bind that here in just a moment. But we'll bind the course ID parameter, and then we'll say order by, and let's put a.id. And that query will work if we have a course ID. Now if we don't, let me go ahead and copy this and we'll just modify it. We want to return all items instead of just the ones where we have a specific course ID. So really what's going to change is our where. We won't have it. We'll just get rid of the where. And after we join on their course ID fields, we'll just say order by. And now here we can say C. I need a capital C, please. There we go. That's what I wanted. And now I'll say course ID. With our if statement complete, we'll go ahead and expand this a little bit, and we'll complete our transaction with the database. We'll create a statement variable, have that equal to the database connection, and then we'll pass in this prepared statement, which is our query. And then we'll have another statement. And whoops, there we go, bind. I don't want this equal, I want to bind the value. And here's our parameter, course ID. Now we want this equal to the variable course ID that's passed in as a parameter. I'm going to copy statement so I don't have to type it quite as many times. Statement, another arrow, and execute. Now we have assignments, and this will equal statement, an error, and we want to fetch all. And from there, one more statement, arrow, and we'll close the cursor. And now we want to return the assignments. So in the end, our function returns all of the assignments that it gathers with this prepared statement and prepared query. Now in this simple application, we're not doing an update function, but we are doing create, read, and delete. This first function is read, where we're getting all of the assignments. We also want to create a delete function, and eventually an add function, which will create an assignment. Here we'll delete an assignment, and we'll pass in the assignment ID. Once again, we need the global for the database connection, and we'll define a query that's much shorter this time. Be delete from assignments where ID equals, and once again a parameter in our query, assign ID. And now we'll once again need the word statement several times. Matter of fact, I think I can copy this and then modify it once again, save some typing. So I'll paste all of this below and we'll see what we can change. The prepared statement is the same. The parameter for the query is different. So it's assign ID, and this would be assignment ID. The execute is the same. We don't need a fetch all, as we're not returning any results, we're just deleting. And then we still need to close the cursor. And that completes the delete function. Now I'll just copy this function and see what we need to change for the add assignment function. We'll start by changing delete to add, and we're going to pass in a required course ID and the description we give the assignment. We need the global database connection once again, and now we need to change our query to an insert statement, and that looks a little different. So we'll insert into assignments, and then we'll have a description and a course ID, and then we'll say values, and now we'll have our parameters, description and course ID. We need to end that with a quote, and there it just wrapped. So it looks a little weird, but that is what we've got. Now, the prepared statement for the database is the same. We need to bind more than one value. So first we'll have the description, and we'll bind that to the description variable. And now I'll just copy this line because we need it one more time, and we'll just change it. And this will be course ID. It binds to the course ID variable. And then we've completed the function. With the assignment DB completed, now let's go ahead and create a course DB as well, and some functions to interact with the course table. We'll start this file with PHP, and then we'll say function get courses. No parameter. We just want to get all the courses. We'll start out with the global DB once again to connect to the database, and we'll define a query, which should be a basic select query. Select all from courses, order by course ID. And now we'll go back, and I'm going to copy really quick from the other table. There we go. Just copy the end of that function so we don't have to type all those statements again. I'm back in the course DB. Once again, Visual Studio Code showing an error just with my name for get courses, but I think it's fine. Now let's go ahead and finish this function. We prepare the query. That's fine. There's no variables, no parameters to bind. We go ahead and execute. We fetch all, but we want this to say courses. We close the cursor and we return the courses. And that is our get courses function. Now we want to have a get course name function. And we're going to pass in a course ID to get the course name. I'm going to select everything from the previous function and modify it, but we'll also start this function out with a short if statement, and we're just going to say if the course ID doesn't exist, if it's false or null, we're going to return the string all courses and not bother with the rest of this. Otherwise, if we have a course ID, we'll go ahead and select those, or select the course name from the specific ID. So the query will then be select all from courses, and we need to add a where course ID equals a parameter of course ID, and we can get rid of the order by, because at this point we're only expecting one name to come back. After that, we prepare the query, but we do need to bind once again. So that starts out with a statement, arrow, bind value, and now our parameter course underscore ID. Oh, I needed the colon at the beginning. There we go, course underscore ID. And then pass in the variable, or a parameter variable. And then execute, and then just a fetch. We only want one record here. And this will be course, not courses. And after that, we close the cursor. And then we need to go ahead and set the course name and return that. So course underscore name is going to equal course, and then course name. And we'll return the course name, because that's what we want to get, is get the course name. And we only had the ID to begin with, so we return that one value that matches, and then we set the course name and return that. Much like the assignment DB, we'll close this out by adding a delete and an add function. So we'll have function delete course. We need the course ID of what we want to delete. And now once again, I'll just copy a little bit from the top function and modify. So we have global DB. Now our query will be delete from, and then it's courses, and instead of an order by, we're going to have where course ID equals a parameter of course ID. Then we have the prepared statement and then a bind statement. So I'm going to copy this. And it's actually the same bind statement. It is the course ID once again. Then we execute. We are not fetching anything. We're just deleting, so we can get rid of that line. We're not even returning anything. We're just deleting that one course. So that is the end of that function. And now we'll do our add course function. And this will take a course name parameter instead of a course ID. Once again, I'm going to copy this function above, paste in, and we have a global DB to start the connection. But now we're going to have another insert. So we'll say insert into courses. And then we need just a little bit different. We'll say course name, which is the value, or it's not the value, it's the title of the column. And then we'll say values, and then we pass in the parameter, course name. After that, we have the prepared statement. And here, instead of course ID, using a course name parameter and course name variable that is passed in as a parameter. And after binding, we execute and we close the cursor, and that is the end of that function. With our model complete and some basic views, at least a header, footer, and error, let's go ahead and turn our attention briefly to the index, and it is the controller for the application. And we'll get started with it. We have to start out by requiring what we need from the model. So we'll look to the model folder and get the database.php file. We'll also require the assignment functions, so assignment db.php, and we'll need the other course functions as well. So course db.php. With those created, we have to think about what data the controller might receive. And of course, we'll be looking at assignment IDs, and we have to consider how those will come to us. And those will be a post request, so we'll use filter input, and then input post, and then assignment underscore ID, and now I'm going to use filter validate int. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy this just to save a little typing, paste it a couple of more times, and instead of assignment ID, the next one is going to be a description. It will also come in as a post, but here it would be given the name of description. And then filter validate will be different as well. It will be filter sanitize string. So we can just change this last little bit, and the next one will be too. So I'm going to press Control D and select both at once, and I'll say sanitize string. Okay, the next one is the course name that we might receive. And then this would also be course name. And it's also a string, so we're good there. Now let's think about the course ID. It's going to be just a little different than these, but it'll start out very similar to assignment ID. But the main difference in the course ID is that we could receive it with a get post as well. So first we'll look to I said get post. We could receive it with a get method or a post method. First we'll look to the post method, which is input post. And here we'll have course ID as well. The filter validate integer is correct. So after that, if it doesn't exist, so I need to put an if statement, if we yet still have no value, essentially null or false for course ID, we need to go ahead and try to assign the course ID again from the get method. So we can change this to input get. Everything else stays the same. Now if it doesn't exist there, it's still going to be null or false, and we're okay with that for the course ID here. So we're not going to try to assign a default value, but the action variable, and the action is what's actually going to help us pick the different routes to take throughout our controller, and it will be a hidden input on the forms. This action variable will be definitely different than the course ID, and we will need some kind of default variable, at least for our own sanity, to let us know what it's doing. So we'll have action, filter input, look to the post first, and here this will be action, and it is a string, but then once again, if we have no action value, we need to take the same approach and look to the get method, and there, if we don't have a value, I'm going to go ahead and assign one, although it wouldn't be critical to making the application work, because we could just put this in the default route. So if action didn't have something and we assigned it the default route, it would work, but at the same time, we're not really documenting the code and spelling out what's going on with it, and that's a good thing to do as well. So here I'm going to put list underscore assignments. So basically this is telling any dev that would follow me or you that, okay, if action wasn't defined, our default action is going to be to list the assignments on the page. So speaking of the default action, that's what the rest of our controller will do, will be to handle the routes we take, and the first one we'll define would be the last one in this big switch statement that handles the routing for us, but it will be the list all assignments, and we'll just make it the default because it will default to that. But once again, it's good to name it up here just so any other dev working on this would know what the default action is. Now, as we take different routes throughout our controller, we're going to need different data to send to our templates in the view. And so we kind of need to know that ahead of time. And our view is going to need a course name. And so now we can call our get course name function, and we can pass in the course ID that we hope to have. We're also going to get all the courses, and so we'll call the get courses function. And we want the assignments too. So the assignments are going to equal get assignments by course, and then we pass in, once again, that course ID value that we hope to have. From here, we can include our view. So we look to the view folder and include the assignment underscore list.php, and we'll need to create that file. I'm looking at this file in the file tree that says assignments.db, and I believe I just typed assignment at the top, and yes, that is what I did. I want to type assignments.db, so we pull in the correct file there. And now let's go highlight the view folder and begin building our assignment list file. Name it assignment underscore list.php. And we're ready to start adding some information here. We'll start with a PHP tag, and we'll include We'll look in the view folder for the header.php. Close that out, and now I'll just copy this, and we'll also use that at the footer. But we've got a lot to put in this template in between, as this is the main template for the application. We'll start out with a section element. Let's give this an ID equal to list and a class equal to list. And we'll close out that section element as well. Now inside this section we've got a lot to put too. So we'll have a header, and let's go ahead and give it a class also. And I'm going to use a block element modifier naming convention here with 2 underscores list, 2 underscores in row, and then once again list, 2 underscores in header. And now inside the header, I guess we could close the header too before I forget to do that. And then we'll put an H1 element, and here we'll just say assignments. But then we also want a form at the top of this application where users can select from a drop menu the assignments they want to see from specific classes, or they could possibly want to view all classes. So this will create a form at the top that will be a drop menu, and it will submit to the controller with the dot. We use the HTTP method of get, and we'll give this an ID equal to list, 2 underscores header underscore select, as it's a select menu, and the class will be the same. Let's go ahead and close out the form as well. Now inside the form, and pretty much every form in this application will have an input with a type equal hidden, and the name will be action, and the action value is what controls how we route the request through the controller. And this will be, we need quotes here, list assignments. After that, we'll go ahead and start adding our select menu, and the name will be course ID, and this will be required to submit this form. Let's also close the select element. And we'll start with a default value if nothing has been selected, and the values are in the option elements for a select menu. And we could do an empty value, but let's set the value equal to a string of 0, which will also evaluate in PHP as false. And we'll close out the option. And now we can do a for each loop and loop through whatever classes exist, or courses. I'm using those words interchangeably. Here we go, course. And now inside of our loop, we will use a PHP if statement, and we'll say course underscore ID. If it equals the course ID that is being looped through, this will allow us to display to the user what course has been selected and what course they're currently viewing assignments from. Let's go ahead and add the PHP to complete this else statement as well. Here we go. Okay, in the if-else statement, if they do match, we want to show an option with a value equal to, and now we'll use some more PHP here, the course bracket, course ID once again, another bracket, and after we're displaying that, or we're not, it's the value actually, the ID, but after we're selecting that, we need to set it to selected. Otherwise, and I'll just copy this much, the option won't be selected, but it will still be there. And so after we have that, we just need to close out the HTML with that little greater than sign. After that, we need to close out the option overall with an option tag. So it would be /option. But before we close it out, I actually jumped one ahead. We also need to provide a value that the user will see, the actual course name. So we'll say course, get the bracket and do the course name here. Whoops. And there we have that value. Now we can complete this form by completing our for each loop. So we say end for each. And then we also need to add a button to submit the form. Let's give this button a class of add-button and bold. And we'll just say go for the text on the button. Let's go ahead and take a look at our HTML. And you can see we've got assignments and a drop menu, no other items in it, just our view all default and a go button. So it's not much, but it's something. Let's go ahead and see if we can set this to the side, and maybe we can view both at some times. We'll pull this down here and make this a little smaller as well. Pulling it over to the side and down. And I can hide the file tree when needed as well. So here we've got the beginnings of our assignment list page. But so far we're just at the header. There's definitely more to add. After the header, we need to see if we have a value or any values inside of the assignments array. So we'll check that. We'll say if assignments, and that will check to see if there's any values in there. And we'll start that with the PHP, and then we'll add a for each loop here, because if there are assignments, we want to loop through those. So we'll say assignments as assignment. And from there we'll add a div, and this class will equal a list, 2 underscores, and row. Inside there will be a nested div that the class equal to list, 2 underscores, and item. And now we'll have a paragraph. Let's give this a class of bold. And we'll use some PHP to display some data here. And this will be the assignment bracket course name. And we need to close out our paragraph. And then we'll have another paragraph, and this will also display some data, and it will be the assignment bracket description. And we'll close out that paragraph. Now we can close out the div, and after that div we can start another div. And this one is going to be class, class equals list, 2 underscores, remove, not remote, remove item. And this will contain our form to delete the list item if we need to. So now we'll start a form element. The action will once again just go to the dot, which is the controller, the root. The method will be post, and we'll close out the form as well. On the form we'll have another hidden input, so type equals hidden, name equals action, and the value, which will once again help our controller route, will be delete, no space, delete underscore assignment. We can wrap this. Okay, the next line will be input type equals hidden once again. This name will be assignment underscore ID. And the value will be equal to some PHP we put in here. we need the assignment bracket ID. And then we need to close out that HTML afterwards. And then before we finish, we need to have a button element. And this class will be equal to a remove-button. And I'm going to paste in a little Emojipedia cancel delete sign I got, and I believe emojipedia.com is where I got this. You could look there, or for Unicode symbols, you could pull in Font Awesome. Pretty much do anything you want to on that button, just so you indicate that it's deleting the item. And so there we've got the div for the remove item. Now we need to close out this other div over here. And then I believe we're going to need to close out even the further up div than that, and yes, we do. After that, we need to close out our for each. And now we should still be in an else, if-else statement. So yes, we need to continue that. And so then in our else statement, this is where there were no items. And now we'll check to see if there's a course ID, because we can deliver different messages to the user. So we can say if course ID there we go. If course ID, now we have a statement to issue to the user, give a paragraph and say no assignments exist for this course yet, because a course ID does exist. And then we can say else, and now we'll do something very similar here. I'm going to scroll just a little to get some room. I can say no assignments exist yet, as there wouldn't be a course ID either. We completed our if-else statement here, but remember we still have an else here that is ongoing from starting an if statement up here if we had assignments in the array, and here we don't, so we need to complete this else statement as well. Put one more line break after that possible paragraph here, and then we'll go ahead and complete. And you can see, since I'm using bracket pair colorizer, that this is the yellow one, and it leads back up here, and here it leads all the way back up to where we checked to see if we had elements in our array. That also completes our section as far as listing the items. So we'll save that and go ahead and reload. And we've got the reply, no assignments exist yet, and that is because we don't have any course IDs, we don't have any assignments, and so it gave us the reasonable reply that we applied right here of no assignments exist yet. Now we will be able to do that soon, because we're going to go ahead and create the add item form and the add category area. All right, let's start the next section, which will be our add assignment form. So we have a section with an ID equal to add and a class equal to add. Let's close out that section. I'm going to scroll up for a little more room to type again. We'll have a H2, and here I'll say add assignment. That went over a little further than I expected. After the H2, we'll start a form. And this action is once again going to just go to the root for the controller. The method will be equal to post. The ID will equal add underscore form. And, two underscores, pardon me. And then we've also got a class equal to add two underscores and form. Let's close out that form also. Now in the form, we're going to have a hidden input, type equals hidden, and then a name equals action, and then the value equals add underscore assignment. And now let's start a div We'll give this div a class equal to add _ and inputs. We'll have a label, as most inputs should. We'll put course here. After the label, we'll start our select menu. This is another drop down for the courses, so we'll give this a name of course ID. And we'll make it required, so you cannot submit the form without picking a course. Now we'll have an option with a value. And let's set this value equal to blank. And that will make sure that this cannot be submitted without a value. And we'll say, please select. We can close that option out. And now we can have our for each again to list all of the courses. So for each, courses as course. And now we'll have options. So our option value is going to equal, and we'll pull in a value from PHP equal to the course, bracket again, course ID, bracket, and we close that out, and then close out the HTML with the other greater than, so that closes out the option tag. And now we'll have an equal sign, and we'll display the course name. So we'll have course again and course name in the brackets. And after that is finished, we need to close our option element. So I should really tab this inside so you can see that's part of the option that's displayed. And here we'll end our for each, end for each. And that ends the select. Notice it doesn't have the if statement we had earlier, as we're not trying to display some selection from the list. This is being just to add an item, so it should always start out with please select. After the select menu, we'll have another label. And here we'll say description. And now for the description, we want an input type equal to text. The name is going to equal description. And then the max length, let's give this 120 characters here. Placeholder will also be description, and it will be required. Okay, and then this is all inside of a div, so let's close out that div of add inputs. And let's go ahead and tab all of that in just so it looks a little better like it's inside the div. And after that div, we need to have another div. And this will have a class of add _ and add item. And let's put a button inside here. So button and then class equals add-button, bold, and we'll just put the word add. And let's close this div. Okay, we've got our section closing there. Now let's just put a little bit after the section closes out, one more line break and a paragraph with a link. This will be href dot, and we'll pass the action parameter right inside the link, and we'll say list _ courses, and we'll say you can view / edit courses at this link. Now we close that paragraph, and we have got the footer, and we're finished with this page. I'll save, and when I reload, we won't see a big difference, but we've at least got an add assignment form now, and it's asking us to please select, and we've got a description and an add button and a link to our courses page that doesn't exist yet. Okay, let's display the file tree, and once again highlight the view folder, click create, and now we're going to create course underscore list.php. And now course list doesn't have quite as much in it as the previous file, but we do need to list all of the courses and be able to add a course. So we'll start with PHP and we'll include the header. Once again, I'll copy that. Oh, we need the view before that. We have to remember that's inside the view. I'll copy that and also add the footer. Makes me want to go back to the assignment list and make sure I did that. Yes, we had the view/header, view/footer. Good. Okay, after that, we'll start with some PHP here, and we'll say if, and we expect to have courses. So we're checking to see if we've got courses in an array. And if we do, we'll do something. So then we'll say PHP else. We'll go ahead and create the closing PHP also. And if we don't have courses, we're just going to say no courses exist yet. But if we do, we need to loop it through and display those courses. So we'll start out with a section, and this will have an ID of list and a class equal to list. And we'll have a header once again. And this header should also have a class equal to list 2 underscores in row and list 2 underscores in header. Inside the header, we'll have an H1 that says course list. And we can close out our header. And now we'll start with some more PHP here, and we'll start our for each. We'll say courses as course. And now inside our for each loop, we'll start a div of a class equal to list 2 underscores in row. And then a div with another class equal to list 2 underscores in item. And this should look very familiar to you from completing the previous page because it essentially mirrors the design. Here we'll have course, a bracket, and course name. And then on the next line, no, it's just a course name because that's all we're handling in this. Of course, it's the courses page. So that's the end of that div, and then we'll have div class equals list 2 underscores and remove item because we do want to be able to remove the courses from this page. Let's go ahead and close out this div. Oh. Now inside the remove item div, we're going to have a form with an action that sends it to the root. The method will be post. Close the form. Inside this form, we're going to have an input type equals hidden. And the name will be action. And the value will equal delete course. We'll have another input with a type equal hidden. The name will be course ID. And the value we'll need to pull from PHP here with course and then bracket, quote, single quote, course ID, single quote, bracket, and then close out the PHP tag. We have a quote and then close out the HTML. And then we need a button. This class is going to equal remove-button. And then we'll close the button, and on the button I'm going to paste in that same cancel delete symbol that I previously had. Need to scroll back over just a little bit to see. Let me see if I can get this to wrap. There, that does it. By pressing Alt-Z you can get the code to wrap. Okay, we completed the form. We closed out one div, we need to close out the next div. And then we need to finish out our for each loop. And then we need to close out our section. And now we've completed the section that actually lists the courses. We still need to add the section where we can add a course. All right, we'll add our next section, and we'll start here, right above the footer. This will be an ID equal to add, and a class equal to add. Close out the section, and inside the section we'll put an H2 and say add course. And now we'll add a form. Once again, has an action going back to the controller. The method will equal post. ID will equal add 2 underscores and form. And the class will also equal add 2 underscores and form. And let's close out the form tag. I'm going to scroll up once again, tab over, and we have an input that is hidden. And a name that equals action. And the value will be add underscore course. Now we have a div, and the class equals add 2 underscore and inputs. Close out that div, and we'll see what goes inside of it. We'll have a label. This says name. And then we'll have an input. Type equal to text. The name will equal course name. Let's give this a max length. I believe we set it at 50 in the database. Placeholder equal to name. We'll also set autofocus, so this focuses in the input when the page loads. And we'll put required. So that's the first div. We have one more div. This class will equal to add item. And now we'll close out the div. And inside the div we'll put a button. The class will equal add dash button, bold, with the word add on the button. We're almost finished. After the section has ended, we want to put a line break and one paragraph that gives a link. And on this link, we'll link back to the controller once again. And for the link, we'll type in view and ampersand there, add assignments. Close out the link, close out the paragraph, and we're good to go. Now I would click over here to view this course list, but without the controller, this won't work as we're passing in a link back to the controller and then we're giving it the action attribute that it needs to route. So right now, this won't link anywhere else other than where it already is. That said, let's go ahead and show the file tree, come back and choose the controller, and then we'll hide the file tree because we can add these other routes now besides the default route, and we've pretty much got everything in place to make them happen. So the first route we'll add is a case, and then we'll say list underscore courses. We'll call the courses function get courses and set that equal to courses, and then we'll include the file we just created, which is view and then course_list.php. And in a switch statement, you need to break, or you will unfortunately continue throughout the statement. After that first case, let's go ahead and add some more. So we'll have case add course. And this also happens on that same page. So we'll call the add course function, and this is where something has been submitted from that page. We pass in the course name value that we should have, and then we'll use a redirect. That'll be location. So we go back to the controller, and then we pass in an action attribute here, and we'll just say list courses. So once we have added that course, we want to once again list the courses, and we show the user that it has been added. And we'll add a break after that. The next case is add assignment. Once we have courses, we can add assignments to those courses. We'll start out with an if statement. And if we have a course ID and a description, that's when we can add an assignment. So then we'll call the add assignment function, and we'll pass in the course ID and the description. And then we'll once again use a redirect with the header, location, dot, and then we pass along course ID equals, we'll put that course ID in there. And so then we'll just see the assignments for that specific course ID, and we'll see that the new assignment has been added to it. And we'll put a break after that as well. Oh no, we don't need to put a break there yet. We've got a little bit more of our if statement. So in the if, we need the else. And really, if we don't have a course ID or description, if we don't have both of those and add assignment's been chosen, there's an error. So we need to set an error variable that is ready to display in our error PHP, and we'll say invalid assignment data, and check all fields and try again. Looks like I need to get this to wrap one more time. There we go. After that, we need to go ahead and include our error PHP. It's also in the view, and then after an error, we'll call exit. But we'll go ahead and put break down here because we might also go in another direction. And it's good practice to have it after every case before the default. The next case is delete course. Here we'll say if, once again, we need a course ID. Then we want to try. We'll do a try catch block, and we'll call the delete course with the course ID passed into it. And the reason we're doing a try catch block is because we have a foreign key. So if we tried to delete a course that had assignments attached to it, we would get an error, and this would throw right here. So we'll call this PDO exception. We'll get E, and this should look familiar. It's a lot like what we have in our database file if there's a database error. But now we'll just assign the error variable right here. So you cannot delete a course if assignments exist in the course. And then we'll once again include the error.php file, and we'll exit. And after this, if we have deleted and everything is as we expect it to, we'll do a redirect once again and say location. We'll have action equals list underscore courses. And after this if statement, we'll put a break. So in this instance, if there's no course ID, nothing really happens. The course is not deleted because it didn't get a course ID to delete. And finally, we have delete assignment. And here we need an assignment ID, so we have to check that. The assignment ID. Then if we have one, we'll call delete underscore assignment and pass in the assignment ID. Then we'll do a redirect. And we'll look at the assignments from the course of where that was deleted, so that'll make it easier to confirm that that has been deleted if there's a long list. Otherwise, we'll say else, and we'll once again define our error. We'll say missing or incorrect assignment ID. And then of course we need to include the error file again. After the if statement, we need another break, and at that point we're at our default and we should be good. So let's go back over the different actions that may occur. We may list courses, we may add a course, we may add an assignment, we may delete a course, we may delete an assignment, and of course the default is to list all the assignments, which is what we set here and we just kind of signified in our code. So now we haven't styled the app to look great by any means. It's just a plain page. But let's go ahead and refresh and see what we get. Right now, no courses exist. It wants us to add a course, but we don't have any courses that exist yet. Let's look at view and add assignments. And here, no assignments exist yet. Add an assignment, but we don't have any courses to select from to add the assignment. So if we click add, it kicks in where it's required and it won't let us submit that. So that's good. That helps us with our foreign key in the database. So let's go back to view edit courses. And now let's add something here. We'll say programming for data analytics. And now we have added programming for data analytics. And there's the delete button. So it's once again not styled, not looking great, but we now have a course. If we go back to view and add assignments, we've got the choice of view all or view the assignments from programming for data analytics. And there it says no assignments exist for this course yet. So that works as expected. View all, no assignments exist yet. Add assignment, we could now choose programming for data analytics. And I'll just put in quiz 2 this week. Click add. And now our assignment is listed up here under assignments. And it showed it for programming for data analytics. So also our if statement work that shows what class we're viewing. So that is the whole logic behind the application. All that is left is to make it look good. So now we can start on the Sass and compile that to CSS. Let's get started styling this application. And by doing that, we're going to first look at the extensions. If you don't have live Sass compiler, that is what I recommend to use. That's what I'll be using. Search for that and you can find it right here and just click the install button. Of course, I'm already installed, so I would have to click uninstall. Go ahead with that. And after you have it installed, I will show you how to use it. But first, I'll go ahead and minimize that. We need to add a Sass folder to our file tree. And there we have it. And I'll add a first file here, and I'll call this main.scss. This main file will just pull in the other files with an import, and they are called partials. I'm going to import in a colors partial. I'm going to import in a mixins partial. going to import a base, import a list, and finally import an add. So we'll need to create all of those partials. And you can see now that we've created this file, I have a Watch Sass button here at the bottom, and we will click that soon. But let's go ahead and create these other files, and then we'll add to them as we go. So we have, they start with an underscore, by the way. You don't have to use the underscore in the import, but you need to name the file with an underscore to indicate to Sass it's a partial. So we have our colors.scss, and then we'll create the next one, and that is mixins.scss. And the next is base. No, I didn't put the underscore. Base.scss. Let's go back and rename mixins, as it needs an underscore here. All right, so we have underscores now. After base, we need underscore list.scss, and then we need an underscore add.scss. With the files created and we're ready to push our Watch Sass button, there's one other thing I want you to check though. Go to your File menu in Visual Studio Code, go to Preferences and Settings, and then you can search Settings for Live Sass, and then just click Edit in Settings. What you want to check, I'll scroll up here just a little bit, is your save path for where you're going to save your CSS. And you also notice my extension name is .min.css, and that's because my chosen format is compressed. So when Live Sass compiler generates or compiles my CSS, it minifies it, and then it saves it in the view folder and then in the CSS folder. And so that's what will happen once we start using Live Sass compiler. You can make those changes and exit preferences if that's what you want to do. I'll leave that up to you. Right now I'm going to click Watch Sass, and you can see it instantly created a CSS folder inside my view folder. And now inside here I've got a main.min.css, and I've also got a map file that is really unnecessary, but I didn't tell it not to create it, so it did. So main.min.css, and then we can see once again in our header, have we linked to that? And yes, view css main.min.css. And that is what you need. So now let's go back, and we've completed our main file. So now let's do the colors. And with Sass, we can create color variables. And instead of having you watch me type out all the different colors, I'm just going to paste it in. I'll save this file. And now notice I've created these different variables to use as I create the styles throughout the application. And so something as simple as font color, just named font color, and it's black, or inverse font color is white. And then there are other things. I'm also using an RGBA here so I can get an opacity on this color, and that's the shadow color I'm using. So there's some different values, and you can see I've also got a border color variable that's the same as the font color. You can double up like that if it makes sense to you. I've got the main background is white, and then the inverse font color is also white. It wouldn't really make sense to put a variable named font color, for example, on the background. So it's however you want to organize it and how it makes sense to you. Now let's go to the mixins file. Mixins are unique to Sass, and they definitely help out because then you can avoid typing things that are repetitive over and over again, and instead just type one line. So here, when we define a flex box, and I called this mixin flex center, I can type justify content, center, and then I also need to type align items and center. And every time I would want to use that in my code, it would want all three of those lines, where we can just now use this mixin that will have one line later on. Besides flex center, I also wanted to find one called flex start, and the main difference there is the justify content is flex start. And then it's also Very handy to use mixins on your media queries. I don't plan on using many media queries in this application, but here we can just name a mixin MQ, pass in the size variable, and now we'll just have to type out the media query this one time, and then throughout the rest of our Sass, it will be much easier. Set the min width to the size variable that is passed in, and now here we can just say at content, and that takes care of the media query. Now we've defined some definitions, but we haven't really applied anything yet, but we'll start to in the base file. The base file is where you really set out the foundation for your page. And so here we'll start with the CSS reset. That's a margin of 0, padding of 0, and box sizing of border box. After that, we go to the root element, which is HTML, and set the font size here so we can use root EMs afterwards, or REMs, and then a font family. Here we're going to use Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif, and that came up. And then color, here's where we can use a variable already. We can say font color. We'll save that much. If we reload, we probably won't see many changes, but it did, our CSS reset did take effect and it got rid of the spaces. Okay, now in the body element, let's set a background color, and we'll set that equal to the body background variable that I defined. And then we'll set a min height of 100 viewport units. And I've got a video about setting the full page size. If you haven't watched that, that will help you understand that min height setting. I could link to that right now. And then we'll include a flex center mixin that we defined. And so that's all I had to type there instead of the 3 lines that were display, justify content, and align items. After that, let's define some properties for the main class that we applied to our main element. We'll start with a background color, and that will be equal to the main -bg variable that is set, width of 100%, max width of 800 pixels, min height of 100 viewport units, padding 1 rem. Now we'll set the overflow -y equal to hidden, and we'll include flex start, and then we'll give a flex direction here of column, as flex usually defaults to a row. And now I'll include that media query, and I'll pass in 800 pixels, and at 800 pixels we'll set a min height of 95 viewport units, likewise a max height of 95 viewport units, border 1 pixel solid, and then we can say border color variable, and then a box shadow 5 pixels, 10 pixels, 8 pixels, and shadow color. Now, if you're wondering about the 95 min or max height, that allows room for that box shadow to show on the bottom as well. So we're talking about a larger screen, definitely larger than an iPad, or at least we're into the size of an iPad at that point. Just a few more base definitions. We'll define for a section element. We also want a width of 100%. Our links will give a color, and we defined a link color variable, and then a font weight, all the links of bold. Let's go ahead and do a pseudo hover here for the links, and we'll say link hover that we defined. And then we also have a bold class when we want to put bold on anything else. Font weight equals bold. And that finishes the base partial. Okay, we're going to do the list next. Let's go ahead and reload the page again. And we can see a few changes here, but not much so far. But by defining these list definitions, we should see a lot of changes. And both these changes will happen on both the course list and the View and Add Assignments page because they're essentially styled the same. So with the list, we'll start with a width of 100%. Max height of 70 viewport units. Overflow-y, we're going to scroll. Then overflow-x, we're going to set to hidden. Margin bottom, 0.75 rem. Border, 1 pixel solid, and the border color again. Now let's go ahead and include one of those mix-ins, and this is the flex start instead of flex center. We'll set the flex direction to column, and position is relative. Now we'll include a media query, and at 400 pixels is when this will take effect. We'll set a max height of 75 viewport units. Let's save that and see what changes we get. Not much, but just a little bit right here. You can see this is already ready to scroll with the assignments that we add. Now we'll define our list, 2 underscores, and row. Width of 100%. Max width 100%. Border bottom, 1 pixel solid border color. We'll include the flex start, and then we'll set the flex direction to row. Quick reload, and that made a change or two. Now we're going to go ahead and set something on the last child. So we have list and then the last child pseudo selector. I'll just say border none. Now let's move on to the list header. Width 100%, padding 0.5 EM, which is different than REM. Position sticky, top 0. Going to add one more color to our list, and I think I'll start that right here above the link color. I'm going to add a header color, and that's going to be 226699. And I think that's what we'll put back here in our list for the background color. As this is the list header, actually, not just the list. Okay, from there we'll say color, and here we want the inverse font color we defined, and then font weight, bold, flex grow, so it fills out the rest of the page. Then we'll put display flex, flex direction, column, and then justify content, we're going to say space between, so that spreads out the row as well. One more definition to add here, and that is a media query. And we'll wait for the 768 pixels, which is an iPad, so at least that large. And the flex direction then can become a row instead of a column. Okay, let's go ahead and refresh our page. There's that header color, looks much better. And as I look at this, I think the link color and the header color should probably be the same. They contrast just a little bit and it doesn't look that good. So instead of the royal blue, let's just make those two variables the same color. We refresh. And yes, I like that color better. Back in the list file, we've defined the list header class, but let's add some more. We've got list 2_ header and then h1. We'll set the font size equal to 1.5 rem. And after that, we've got list 2_ header 1_ select. Display is flex. Justify content is flex start. And then the margin dash left is 1 rem. After that, let's go ahead and list 2_ header select and then button. We'll set the background color equal to the go button. And we'll set the margin dash left to 0.25 rem. Okay, let's refresh and see what we've got up here with our go button and everything we just changed. Well, we have a green go button. The rest doesn't look like it changed too much yet. I'm going to scroll up to have a little more room to type. And we'll start the list 2_ item class. And here we'll set this to flex grow of 1 and a padding 0.5 rem. And then we'll define the list remove item class. Here we'll include flex center, that mixin we defined. A little more room, and we'll define the remove dash button. Give this a height of 100%, width of 100%, font size 1 rem. Let's make the background on the remove button transparent. Border of none. Padding right and 0.5 rem. And an outline, let's set that to none also. Let's go ahead and refresh again. Oh, and there our row looks much better. The flex has gone ahead and expanded. We've made our button for deleting looking better as well. Just one more thing to add to our list file for now, and that is a remove dash button pseudo class of focus, since we removed the outline, and a remove dash button pseudo class of hover. And here we'll add a text shadow, 2 pixels, 2 pixels, 5 pixels, and then we'll pull in that shadow color. So if I reload the page, yep, we get just a little shadow over our delete button as we're ready. We have one more partial to complete, and that is the add partial. But first, let's go ahead and look at our View Edit Courses page as well, as these styles have also applied there to that list. And the styles we now apply for the add will apply to the add course section as well as to the add assignment section. So at the beginning of the add partial, we have the add class, and then we say we're selecting an H2 that is the direct descendant of the add class, and here we're going to have the color as link hover, and font size is 1.25 rem. And once again, I should possibly rename that link hover because that's doing a double duty for the H2 color that is not a link at all. And I'll consider coming back to that. But right now we'll go ahead and finish this form. The add form has a width of 100%. Display is a grid, which is a little bit different than a flex blocks. So we'll do grid template columns, and I'm going to say 80%, 20%. And then a column gap between the grid blocks, you could say, of 5 pixels. Now I'm going to include that media query again. And here at 600 pixels, we're going to grid template columns 90%, 10%. Let's go ahead and refresh that. Scrolling up just a little bit, let's go ahead and add some more. We have the add 2_form space label. And here we'll position the label absolute. And we'll also send it left minus 10,000 pixels. And that will leave a label on the page that will be available for a screen reader. We'll do add 2 underscores and inputs. We'll have grid column start at 1 and grid column end at 2. Display flex. Justify content is flex start. And the flex direction is column. Scrolling once again, we're going to go ahead and add 2 underscores inputs, and then the direct descendant is an input. And I'll do that again, and the direct descendant is a select. So both the inputs and the select. And I get a font size of 1 rem, padding 0.5 rem, and border 1 pixel solid, and we'll get that border color again. And now the next we'll have add 2 underscores inputs and the direct descendant, just the select on this one, and we'll set the border bottom to none. And now 2 more underscores and add item. This will be grid column start 2, and then grid column end 3. And we'll include flex center mixin. Okay, now we get to the button class, add dash button. Height of 100%, width of 100%, color, inverse font color, font size, 1 rem, background, let's set that equal to that header color again, and then the border, 1 pixel solid, and here we're going to do the header color on the border, and then a border radius, so we round those corners just a little bit, of 10 pixels, padding of 0.25 rem, and an outline of none. Let's go ahead and refresh the page and see what we've got. Oh, those buttons look much better now. And if we look at the other page, it is also looking good. Not much left to add, but we do have a few pseudo selectors for this add button since we removed the outline, which is a good practice because you need to indicate some way that they have been selected if you remove the outline that is default to the browser for when those do have the focus. And a shadow color here. And now that we've done that, we have one more, and that is for the add dash button active. And we're going to put a transform on it, and we'll say 1 pixel, 2 pixel, and then we'll put a box shadow, 1 pixel, 0, and the font color. These should give a little bit of the illusion of being pressed. Once we mouse over, the button gets a drop shadow, just a little bit of that box shadow actually. And then when we press it, the shadow changes and you can just see just a little motion. And that's what we were going for. So now we've completed the application and we can test it out. We've got one class in here and we've got an assignment. Let's go ahead and add another assignment. And now we've got a couple of assignments under one class. Let's edit courses. And let's add something like backend web dev 1. And there's our new class. We'll go back to add assignments. We can choose backend web dev 1, and we can say to-do list project. And now, of course, we've got backend web dev 1 selected here at the top, and it's showing we've added the to-do list project assignment. We can go back and view all. And now here's all of our assignments, the 2 for programming for data analytics, 1 for backend web dev, and everything's working as planned. Let's go ahead and try to delete something. So I'll delete one of the data analytics assignments. Oh, we've got an error. Checking back through the code, I think we'll find a typo has caused the problem. I left the in out of assignment right here in the controller, the very first variable that we get when we filter the input. It's always good to test the applications out. Let's save that and go back. And now back to the list. And once again, try to delete this assignment. And it is deleted, no problem. Okay, let's go to courses. And we've got a testing 2-3 course here that we don't need. Let's delete that. And it is deleted, no problem. Our application is working as expected. Let's go ahead and look at the mobile view. And everything appears to be just like we would want it in the mobile as well. Hi, I'm Dave, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Remember to keep striving for daily progress instead of perfection. Subscribe to my channel and ring the bell to be alerted when I post new tutorials. I'll see you next time.